And here we are.
And here we are. Uh, Good afternoon, good evening, good morning around the world. I'd like to thank everybody for joining us on our Meet the Masters series here with Venus Optics, Laowa lenses. My name is Stephen Neff. I'm the U.S. National Sales Manager for Venus Optics. I'm very excited today to be joined by Benoit Fink, or Finky on YouTube. Uh, yeah, I want to jump right in and say thank you for joining us. I did a little bit of research and sort of followed the progression of your YouTube channel. And it's sort of a fun progression to see. I went back to some of your early videos that you posted there. I'm not sure where else you're posting, where else the progress is shown, but it was fun to go back 3, 4, 5 years and see where you started, and then see some of the stuff that you're doing now. It's pretty cool. So, can you give us a quick introduction on yourself and your background and where you're coming from?
Sure. Well, I'm Benoit Fink, as you said. I'm an FPV drone pilot. We'll get into that in a second and explain you in detail what it is. And basically, now I shoot for commercials, music videos, feature films with a very specific kind of drone, let's say. And yeah, I've been doing this for 4 years and a half as a hobby, and then 2 years and a half ago, I decided to go full time and to make it my job, basically.
Awesome. So the progression for the program today, the outline that we've talked about, and we've got is we're going to talk about just FPV drones in general, and we can see a whole bunch behind you. We decided to talk about that, some
Yeah.
of the differences on what FPV versus a traditional drone, and some of the other options out there. What changes and what the differences are. We're going to jump into a little bit of a beginner's guide. Where does somebody get started if they wanted to? Then we're gonna learn some of the skills and some of the additional techniques that you've developed over the years, and then we'll have a Q&A towards the end. I want to jump off right at the beginning here. We do have a coupon code for anybody that is joining. Code Benoit5 on venuslens.net gets you an extra 5% off your purchase. There's a limit of 20 codes available. So if you use that code, if you're one of the first 20 people, you'll get an extra 5% off your purchase. So I wanted to throw that out there quick just so we saw it, and we'll mention that again as we go. So first and foremost, FPV drone versus a more traditional drone standard. So I have flown a handful of different DJI drones and certainly enjoy it. It's a lot of fun. FPV looks really different, and I've been intimidated by it for a long time. So I'm interested in. Can you explain what the differences in the equipment is, and the differences in the controls and the look? Like, yeah.
Yeah. So generally, the main thing, I mean, FPV comes from first person view, and it means that we're using these goggles or different ones, but basically goggles that we put on our faces to see from the perspective of the drone itself. So it's kind of like being in a mini cockpit inside the drone and to pilot from that point of view instead of just piloting from a perspective, I mean, from the ground and seeing where the drone goes. And then that enables very different types of piloting. And most FPV pilots, they will fly in manual mode. So that means that they will have no help whatsoever from the drone. And that means that it's going to fly very differently. It's going to fly in a more dynamic way. It's going to fly a lot more like a bird. And also, what I'm usually saying is that DJI drones are very smart and our drones are extremely dumb. But the fact that they're dumb means that you can send them into a wall if you want to. But if you aim in for that small gap that's right in between the wall and another wall, for example, you can fly through it. While with a more traditional drone, you will likely the drone is going to fight you back because it's going to think you're getting into a wall and it's going to try and just not go there. So FPV allows for a lot more precision compared to the traditional drones. And also the camera is hard mounted on the drone. So that means that wherever the drone is looking, that's where you are essentially framing. And that enables new things and new movements. It's also really athletic. It moves really fast compared to a traditional drone. So yeah, and it looks like this. Yeah, I have one. So I can show it to you. So it kind of looks like this with a small camera at the bottom, and yeah, then it's got 4 motors or 8 or 6. But yeah, the point is it's a little bit smaller than your traditional drone as well.
Okay, well, and so that to me looks like a fairly large FPV drone, right?
Yeah,
That
yeah,
one is not a like yeah, that one looks like it's got some extra stuff going on. So if it, like
yeah.
from a small scale without like so just using the small camera, somebody that wants to just get in and start flying, um, like is there an entry level to sort of start and get used to? What is that? Like what's the progression up to using something like that with a separate lens mount and everything on it?
Well, you can start really, really small. There's like very, very tiny. As you can see behind me, probably this. It comes in all sorts of shapes and sizes, and and yeah, you can start from something very, very small. That's about 20 grams, and you can just practice in your apartment or in your house. This is how I learned actually. Some people will like to learn on simulators and then from that, you build up the technique and the skills to actually fly a regular size FPV drone, which is usually a 5-inch propeller size drone. It's about this big, basically, and and then you can just start learning from there. There's a bunch of guides online on video. I've made one that you can find both on my Instagram by just looking at Benoit Fink, and then you'll find the guide on the FPV guide, or on my YouTube Finky. You'll find it, and then there's a lot of different beginner guys out there. It's usually like the main thing about FPV when you're getting started is that it's really intimidating because you have to usually build the drone yourself, and then you crash it, and then you have to rebuild it or something goes wrong with it. And but one thing that the main skill that you need to have to fly FPV is to know how to use Google and to be able to look for answers because there's lots of answers out there. There's a lot of Facebook groups, there's a lot of YouTube tutorials, there's a lot of forums, a lot of different support out there for people that are starting out basically. And you shouldn't be scared of like reaching out to your local community. There's a local FPV community pretty much everywhere if you look close enough. And yeah, that's the main thing.
So so I want to back up and make sure I understand. So that the difference. So I'm used to let's say a DJI Mavic or Phantom or something in that vein. Um, when I take my hands off the controls, the drone
It's
just sits in space, right?
yeah.
FPV, when you take your hands off the controls,
Oh, it will go with the last command that it got. So
it'll just
again,
continue where it
when
was
I'm
headed.
saying
Okay. I,
exactly. So again, when I'm saying that it's really dumb as a drone, it's literally it's just doing whatever was said last, and it will keep on going until it crashes into something, basically, or
so,
it just goes to
so
the
can I
moon.
make a general, sort of a broad generalization that a traditional drone may be a better platform for still photography, like aerial still photography, whereas
Oh yeah.
FPV, like video, is what is going to be the focus. Is that a fair?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, for still photography, you'll need a traditional drone, but then these traditional drones can do a lot of different video shots as well. But yeah, the main focus for FPV is definitely video. There's no taking pictures with what we do. And yeah, then there's also just having fun, like there's a lot of people that just do it for the adrenaline that you get out of it because it's thrilling. And you fly, you can go 100 miles an hour, and you go from 0 to 60 miles an hour in roughly 1.5 seconds. So you go faster than any hypercar, and you're in the pilot seat right there. And so, yeah, a lot of people do it for that. A lot of people are starting to do it for like cinematography in general. And usually, like the way I try to explain it to my directors or DOPs is imagine that you have a camera that is not constrained anymore by any type of, I mean, about by the ground, by movements, and it can pretty much do anything you like. Um, it can fly through like windows of a car. It can do tons of different things and movements that seem very natural, and at the same time that have never been seen before. And so yeah, that's how I define it usually.
Awesome. So, all right. So we're backing up to beginner guide and getting started. Um, Regulation, and like licensing, and I'm assuming that it's going to be different around the world. But is
Yeah.
there sort of like, have there been any like generally accepted things that you're paying attention to as far as licensing goes?
So basically, for in a very broad way, because as you said, each regulation is completely different from one country to another. And even in Europe right now, we have a European regulation, but we still have local regulations here and there, everywhere that changes. Yeah, because I didn't say it before, but I live in Paris. I'm based in Paris. So yeah, but I work all over the world. But yeah, basically, it's going to be different from one country to another all the time. But the general rule is that if you're doing it for fun, you don't need a license in most cases, and but you need to stay off regulated airspaces. So in most cities, you can't fly just like that. You have to find places where you can actually use it, and then for professional use, you will need mostly a license. In the US, it's the Par 107. In Europe, we have a European license now, but there's also local licenses from one country to another. And then it will depend on weight, and then it gets more and more complicated as we get into it. But basically, you will need some sort of license if you want to do it professionally. If you don't want to do it professionally, just make sure you're not flying in a restricted airspace, or you are not being you're not putting anyone at risk, or you're not being a danger to even cars or anything really, and should be fine.
So you touched on a little bit more the excitement and the thrill, and then so I want to ask about FPV racing, and if and
Mm-hmm.
sort of that, like, that component of it as it compares to, and then we're going to move into, and I'm going to ask, I've got a lot more questions about the cinema side of FPV. But as far like FPV racing, is it, I mean, it's speed, control, like what are the things that you're paying attention to if you wanted to get
Uh,
into FPV racing relative to video or cinema?
yeah. So both are very, very different, as you mentioned. For me, most people that do racing, it will be really hard for them to become really good like cinematic pilots, and it's even worse for cinematic pilots to become good racers. The level in racing is so high today that you basically need to do this and this only all day if you want to make a decent time. and it's a skill of its own. It's a little bit like BMX and road cycling on the other side.
Hmm.
It's two different animals, really. I don't race, for example. I'm really bad at it. I went to maybe a couple races, something like this, and it didn't go well at all. But yeah, it's for racing. What you're looking for is not necessarily to go real fast all the time, but you're looking for trajectory and to have the smoothest trajectory and the smoothest transitions from one obstacle to the next. And it's also a skill about there's also a lot of memory involved because you need to remember the track and it goes so fast that you'll probably do a lap in 30 seconds. So you need to remember where you have to go every time. And that's one of the things that I found confusing when I tried to race. Finding those gaps and like those places to like, okay, this is now I'm turning here, now I'm doing this.
So it does it. I mean, does it become a muscle memory thing where
Oh
you
yeah,
want to fly the track and like you're not like you're seeing it just to make sure your time is tracking, but you know that next turn. I'm picturing
yeah,
bobsled. The Cool Runnings is my reference point, but
mm,
you're focused and you are picturing that track all the way through, and then just using
yeah,
the reference point of the video to see it, right?
yeah, absolutely. That's the way it is. It's at the highest level, it's almost pure muscle memory, and it's about how fast can you learn a new track and have it in your muscle memory right away. And yeah.
All right, so now let's talk a little bit more into. I do have a question that's still on the beginner level in the chat from Space Cats. Is it easier to fly using goggles or just fly as normal drones? So I'm guessing like if I'm a beginner and I've never flown anything, should I jump into an FPV or should I start on a more traditional drone that has some of that additional intelligence?
Well, it really depends on what you want to do. Personally, I started with FPV right away because I really wanted that thrill and that like the fun of FPV, and I was not necessarily into. I was not looking for a new camera or a new way to film things, and so yeah, and also both are so different that I don't really think you will learn from traditional drones. You will learn something to transition to FPV. It goes the other way around. Like if you know how to fly FPV, you know how to fly a traditional drone. But it doesn't go. It doesn't translate the other way because it's its own way of working the sticks and the fact that it's all manual changes a lot of things. But the best way to me, if you want to start and you know that it's FPV that you want to do in the end, would be to just start with FPV and to not start in any type of stabilized mode or anything, just what we call acro, which is the mode where if you move it like this, it's going to stay like this until you tell it to tilt back on the other side. And that way you just learn how to fly really fast. And
So, all right, so you're selling me on it. I'm definitely in my head thinking, all right, if I want to get started, what's my like what's my base level of investment into
um,
controller, goggles, aircraft, battery, like just to get me in the air and flying? What's the base level that
so
I'm looking at?
so you can get started with as low as like $200 for like the very small ones of like that are like 20 grams. But the usual budget that I give people, if they really serious about it and if they don't want to start with something very cheap that they will replace in less than a month, is about $2,000. For $2,000 you get everything and you get things that you can grow on, things that you will use probably for the next 3, 4, 5 years, and that you can keep on rebuilding, and that you with reliable parts. And so yeah, about 2000s, and then each drone will cost an extra 500 for the base ones. It will cost around, yeah. As you can see, I've got like about 25 behind me. So yeah, because you always think, oh yeah, I'm getting this drone, and then it's fine, but then you want to get another one, and then another one, and then another one.
And so, what are the components of those? What are the core components of that initial investment? Right. So there's the in my head, it's the
So
aircraft itself, the goggles, the controller. Like like
yeah.
does the aircraft? Are there components of the aircraft? Is it separate or it like?
So I mean, you can buy either like a ready to fly, so something that is already built, or you can build it yourself. And then I mean, then it breaks down into a lot of components like the frame, the motor, the ESC, the flight controller, the camera, the transmitter, the receiver for the radio signal. So yeah, it breaks down into a lot of parts. But then from like after the drone, you've got the radio controller, and then you've got the goggles as well. And that's the main stuff. But then around it, there's so many other things. It's like when you buy a camera, really. Like you don't just buy a body. You have to buy the lenses, you have to buy the batteries, the charger, etc. It's the same here. You have to buy the batteries, the charger, the tools to fix your drone when it gets broken, the propellers to replace them when they get broken. You also have to buy some spare parts for your drone because you're probably going to break some of it, and this usually adds up to about $2,000 in the end. So yeah, my usual budget when I say 2,000 is with spare parts, with every single thing you need to get started, basically.
So all right, so spare parts, and so is that getting me to a point where I have a cinematic camera, or like at a base level, or is that before adding a? That's just the FPV camera, and that rig. Adding a camera on top of that that's actual for my
Uh,
footage is separate, right?
yeah. I mean, usually I never recommend to start with anything else than a GoPro if you want to start filming with the drone, and practice for about a year to 2 years before attempting to putting any other type of camera on there, because it gets a lot more complicated once you try to put let's say a red Komodo or black magic on the drone. Because for years we've tried, I mean, we were just flying the GoPro, so this is pretty much figured out now. And over the last maybe year to 2 years, we've been trying to fly better cameras. We've been trying to fly cinema cameras, basically, like yeah, like the red Komodo, like the Black Magic, like I mean, I've got the Sony FX6 as well. I mean, just those kind of lightweight cinema cameras around 1 kilo is what we're aiming for right now, and it's been a huge journey to bring it that way. But you can do a lot of great things with the GoPro. Like if you want, we can show a show reel that was 100% shot on GoPro to give people an idea of the types of shot that you can get.
Yeah, let's see the reel. Let me pull this up. All right. So I will admit that is actually the first time that I have watched through your full reel there, and my heart's pumping. That's real. Like some of those shots are things that I like. The close-up stuff with people in it. That's some stuff that I have not. I feel like I haven't necessarily seen from FPV before. So that was really really cool, and stuff that in my head I'm trying to think of how would I shoot this without the drone,
Different.
right? Like,
Yeah, you
and there's
can't.
just no way to get that shot. Um, so, all right, so that all of that is with a GoPro onto the FPV drone. Um,
Yeah.
Once I want to start expanding beyond the GoPro, I'm not ready to put a Red Komodo or an FX6 on, but I'm
Mhm.
progressing and I want to. What's my first step past the GoPro? I want something that's got a little bit more power, a little more image quality.
Uh, Well, the Blackmagic is really the go-to. Then the Blackmagic Pocket 4K. It's fairly inexpensive compared to the others. It's about 4 times cheaper. So yeah, that's a good way to start. This is what we actually started with when we started daring to do this about a year and a half ago or 2 years ago when we thought, okay, well, we can probably put this type of camera on and it should be fine. But it was with really, really experimental drones that we had no idea were going to work or not. But yeah, it
So
kind of worked, but it needed a lot of reiterations and things to come to where we are now.
so yeah, so before the call, you showed me one of your rigs using the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema 4K. Can you pull that? Is that right there? Can you
Yeah.
pull that one out again?
Uh, So this one is pretty advanced because it's not the one where you want. It's not necessarily what you want to do once you step it up. But this is the one. So this one is called Le Pigeon, like the pigeon. It's from a guy called Sam Strawhat, and he designed the frame, and he also figured out the way of dismantling the black magic, because basically on this one you have a black magic, but the black magic is just here, like you can just see
Yep,
the
that's the
main
control
board and then the
board. Yep.
sensor that's out. It's not the most forgiving drone because if you crash it, you'll probably break the sensor or something. So I wouldn't necessarily suggest this as an addition, but like as the next step into something a little bit better than a GoPro. But it is an amazing machine, and I use it a lot because we have weight constraints here in France. Like the regulation is pretty stiff on weight. So this drone can get me city shots like the others really can't because of the weight. And that is a pretty fantastic, fantastic platform to work with. The way he actually, the guy that made it originally, uh, came up with it. It's because he crashed his drone that had a black magic on, and he was like, "Great, now I can take it apart and figure out whether or not it's going to be I'm going to be able to put this somewhere else." So yeah,
So, all right. So then I think we can jump into optics. I want to, as we're progressing into larger and scaling up, we've got a question, and I did see that on your YouTube channel. I watched your review on the DJI FPV offering. Can
oh
you
yeah.
give us a good, like a 30-second? What are your thoughts on getting started in that direction, or is that a good platform to start with and move through, or
It,
would you
it really
avoid it?
depends. It really depends. To me, it is an interesting platform if you don't want to bother with learning about FPV whatsoever, because it's very convenient. It's working really well out of the box. You don't have to learn about building. You don't have to learn. You don't really have to learn about piloting because you can. It has the different modes where you start as a traditional drone and then you can slowly transition into something fully manual. So on in that sense, it's pretty great. But on the other side, it's not the image is not as good as a GoPro. So if you want to do it professionally, I wouldn't suggest it. It's if you crash it, it's gonna be pretty expensive compared to building your own, and also it doesn't fly the way the a self-built drone flies. It's not as fun. It's it can be fun, but it doesn't fly that great, to be honest.
So if you have some idea of eventually moving up and going beyond it with something that can handle something a little more cinematic, it's probably not a good stepping stone. You'd say,
Oh no, it's worse than the GoPro in terms of image quality. So
yeah.
no, the best stepping stone afterwards is probably to get something like this one over there. It's called the Shendrone Thick. And this one with the Blackmagic Pocket 4K is probably your best bet after the GoPro. But there's a lot that can be done with the GoPro. I mean, I've shot an Yves Saint Laurent commercial with the GoPro, and it just opened up a whole world of. I mean, if you have good post production, you can do a lot of things with the GoPro. I shot at night, which is, I mean, the GoPro is famous for not being good in low light, and still like we managed to pull out some interesting picture out of it. So I would suggest, yeah, like practicing for 1 or 2 years, feel real comfortable, and then move on to something like maybe the Shendrone Thick, something that you can put any camera on, and yeah.
So that's becoming more of a platform where you're actually just mounting the camera right on top, right? You're just
Mm.
taking whichever camera you have and you're deciding to fly with. It's not like that the first Blackmagic 4K that we looked at where it's the
Oh yeah,
camera
it's
torn apart and
purpose
taken out. This you're just taking the camera,
and
attaching it
putting it
right on
on.
top and running that way, right?
Yeah, the difference with these ones compared to the traditional small GoPro FPV drone is that this one will have 8 motors, and it's got slightly larger propellers. The propellers on a normal GoPro drone are 5 inch, and the propellers on this type of drone is 7 inch. So not much bigger, but there's 2 times the propellers, 2 times the electronics, and there's a lot of things that can go wrong with it. So it's it takes some experience before a building it, and then b flying it, because you need to be able to tell if something's wrong right off the bat just by feel. And that's something that you only get out of experience. And then to work with it is an even bigger story, because then you have so many things to stress about already when you're flying FPV on set, that adding the camera and exposing properly, uh, making sure that you record it, because once it takes off, there's no way to trigger a record button or anything. It's either recording or you forgot, and then when you land, you're gonna have a nasty surprise, and then you have to think about the battery and a lot of different things. So yeah.
So all right, so we've progressed now, and I've got the one of the platform drones behind you, and I'm shooting with the Pocket Cinema 4K. So it's a micro four thirds sensor. Optics. What are the
Yeah.
lenses that I want to like? What did you start with, and what have you had success with?
Well, for what we look for in FPV is something that is light, and also something that is super wide. And to do that, the 7.5, there's pretty much nothing that beats it. It's I think the lightweight version is about 150 grams, if I'm correct. I know that the normal version is 200, so maybe this one is about 150 or 170 grams, which is this one's the lightweight. This gives you kind of something that's similar to the GoPro, except that it's got zero distortion. So it's already looking cinematic and it's looking beautiful out of the box. And then the newest one as well, the 10 is pretty great because it's even lighter and it narrows things down slightly when you want to shoot. I use it mostly when I want to shoot people. I because I use it on this platform on the one with the decased black magic. And for this one, I'll use this one when I'm filming people, so I don't have to get as close to them, but it still looks like I'm right in there. And then this one, I'll use it for landscapes, mostly the 7.5. And with these two lenses on the Micro Four, on the Black Magic, you pretty much sorted. I don't have to worry about anything else. I had tried another Samyang one with 7.5 because it was light and it was cheap, but it was also a big fisheye and it doesn't look as great. So in the end, I ended up falling back on these, and they're super fast as well. It's like f2. So yeah, there's pretty much nothing that beats it, to be honest.
Awesome. So the so the 7.5, and now actually there's a brand new version of that that allows that gives you the aperture control. So there's electronics so that you're getting EXIF data and automatic aperture control. When you're flying, are you using any automatic exposure functions? Right, when you're setting your exposure, locking everything in, and going. Right, you're not letting the camera make
Yeah,
any decisions after the fact.
yeah, most of the time, yeah. Because sometimes we'll fly, but it can actually be useful. I don't think the Pocket 4K does auto exposure though, so it's not going to be able to control aperture. But I mean, in a perfect world, you'd want it because you want to fly. For example, if you're flying indoors to like outdoors, which happens a lot when we fly FPV, you kind of want to have that. But in most cases, I like to lock it down so that it just stays there and I don't let my camera make any decisions for me. Just I like them just like my drones, not not doing anything for me, and I'm staying in control.
I- Um, so let's dig in to more some of those skills and some of the settings. So what, like when you're flying the Pocket Cinema or any camera that you're flying, frame rates, um, exposure settings, are you flying
So
through and looking and seeing what are some of those thoughts, and where should we be focused?
So in frame rate, I like to be usually shooting at least two times the output. So if we're shooting 24, I'd like to shoot in 48. If we're shooting 25, 50, and then 30, 60. I do that because we move so fast that sometimes it's nice to kind of slow things down a little bit to be able to just bring it down and to something that people can actually understand. Because I mean, a lot of times on set it will be all fine, like everyone's watching and it will be all fine as we do it, but then as you're editing, you kind of want to slow it down. So I try to be faster when possible. On certain cameras, like on the Komodo, it's not necessarily possible because if I'm shooting 6K and I want my DOP wants to have the full sensor, I can't really do it without I can't really do it at 50 or 60 frames. So on this one, I'll go just with the output. But then sometimes I just knock it down to, for example, the 6K 2.41. I mean 241. So on this one, I can shoot 50 frames with it's just like I mean it's just slightly cropped in on top it at the top and at the bottom, and then I'll just go down in resolution. Anything between 4 and 6K is usually what we go for these days, and it should be fine.
Okay, so you're shooting at those higher frame rates so that you can slow down and go into a slow motion, like a slow motion shot, which I'm guessing with the speeds that you're flying may not even feel that slow motion.
Exactly. I mean, sometimes you can literally pop over something in half a second or a second. So for certain movements, it's really necessary. And then in terms of shutter angle, I usually am at 180. I used to do for the GoPro, it's different though. For the GoPro, I shoot at 90 degrees because I just found out that this is like the best thing to use for stabilization and that it's kind of we're moving so fast, we're moving even faster on the GoPro, so it really makes sense to go with that angle. For the cinema cameras, though, the motion blur doesn't come as easily as it can on the GoPro, where it just becomes all fuzzy. So it's not really nice motion blur on the GoPro; it's just fuzzy. Well, on this one, it's going to be you're really going to get some direction nor motion blur. And for that, I go. That's the reason why I still go 180. Sometimes I go a little bit lower. And then in terms of aperture, I'll try to be between f4 and f8, right, in most cases because we can't really focus ball right now on the drone. I made a little system to do that, but it adds weight, so we don't really like that when we fly FPV. And most of the time, since we're flying with really wide lenses, unless we get real close to something, it should be fine at infinity. So that's why I usually set it to. I set it to infinite and somewhere between f4 and f8, and it should be fine. But I sometimes have to go lower than that. That's why I've got the on the Komodo. That's why I've got the 15 mil because that one goes 2.1 and and it looks great. So why not using it? But yeah, that's basically it.
So, all right. So I'm going to break down. I think, and I'm going to may expose some of my limitations on my cinema knowledge. But okay, so we're shooting. Our output is going to be for YouTube at a 4K 30 frame per second shoot. So you're shooting. Your goal is going to be to shoot 4K 60 as far
Yeah,
as the frame rate, so that you can slow it down, the playback footage. And then you're saying you're going to use a 180 degree shutter angle. So at
yeah,
4K 60, you're going to be using double the frame rate. So
yeah. So
120,
it's a one
120th,
one two four.
125th of a second is your shutter speed.
Mm.
So on the GoPro, which is more likely where I'm going to get started with, you're saying a 90 degree shutter angle, which would mean like a not like what would my shutter speed, and the GoPro is going to be a little different because you're not setting the shutter speed. What is like on a 90 degree shutter? Is that a little bit
It's
shorter?
1/240. Yeah, I actually messed it up. It's for the cinema camera, it's going to be 1/120, and for the GoPro, it's going to be 1/240.
Okay, so
Uh,
you're shooting an even faster frame rate because you're trying to stop the motion in each frame a little bit more.
oh no, you're shooting 60 frames, but your shutter speed is going to be 1/240 uh, to be at 90 degrees. And
Okay,
uh, and and for the cinema camera, your shutter speed is going to be if you're shooting 60, your shutter speed is going to be 20, so that
yep.
it's a 180
Okay,
degree shutter angle.
so a 90 degree, because I'm going to a full circle, so a 90 degree shutter angle is a quarter, so that the frame rate is only a quarter of the full shutter speed, right? 90 degrees, so a 360 degrees in a circle, and then limited cinema knowledge, just enough to be dangerous. But okay, so GoPro,
So
I'm shooting
basically,
even faster.
on the GoPro, the shutter is faster because you want it to be sharper.
Yeah, you're stopping that motion because, and that's where you said on the GoPro. It's not a smooth motion blur. It's just soft and
It
fuzzy.
can get really fuzzy, yeah. So that's why I like to do that.
Um, ISO? Are you getting into like so shooting outdoors
Mm,
or versus shooting indoors? Are you paying
I,
like
mm. On
yeah? Are
ISO,
you
I
how far are
always
you willing to push the
use
camera?
cameras. I always try to shoot with the camera's native ISO. On the Komodo, it's going to be 800. On the FX6, it's going to be either 800 or 12,800. So with that one, I'm pretty much sorted. I can go as dark as I want. Sometimes with the Komodo, I'll bump it up to 1,600, 1,600. But that's as high as I'm willing to go. I'm not willing to go 3,200, for example, because I think it's too much on the Komodo. And then on the Black Magic, I'll go 3,200 because that's also a native ISO from the camera. So yeah.
So at this point, what camera are you flying most?
Oh, the Komodo, 100% the Komodo. It's I've got four of these, and I've got a fifth one on the way because I just like this is the camera that everyone is going with, and for FPV, and it's light. It's super super tough as well. It can take abuse if I ever just crash. So that's useful, and also the image out of it is really really good. So that's why I use the most. Now I'm also looking into the FX6 because I think it's an interesting camera. It's just lacking the raw image, but it's got a lot of good things going for it as well. So I think now my winning combo is going to be these two cameras, and then when I can't use these two because of weight, I'll go to the Blackmagic 4K.
So the Red Komodo, it's no longer a micro four thirds sensor,
No, it's
right?
a Super
It's
35.
so APS-C covering a full Super 35. Uh, so what are the optics that you're using there? What are the lenses that you're going to on that one?
Okay, so I've got like a full set for these. It's all a Laowa set. It's so, but honestly, like I really looked into this when I started, and it's not because it's I mean we're on the Laowa stream right now, but I really looked into this when I started with the Komodo, and I wanted something with RF that was going to be light and that was going to be wide. And it was impossible to find outside of Laowa. Literally, uh, I mean, it's such a good. We were very lucky to have Laowa because otherwise we just wouldn't have anything that fits to our needs right now. In such a good way for FPV, and that's why it's like a match made in heaven to me, like between Laowa and FPV. Um, so one of the base ones that I use is the 9 mil. So the 9 millimeter RF. It's a T 2.9, and I use the Cine version because why not? The other one weighs the same, and at least for this one, if I want to, I can focus pull if needed. It's a really good lens for when I'm trying to get that higher frame rate because the Komodo gets a crop factor when you go 4K from 6K. That means that you're losing quite a lot of FOV, and to compensate for that, I'm using the 9 mil. And the 9 mil on 4K will do just like the 14 mil on 6K, which means that it will do just like a 20 mil on full frame. And I think it's a great place to be, like 20 mil equivalent on full frame. But I also like to go wider, to go like for example to 15. So after that, I also have the 11, the 11 and the 14. I have like both of these. They're amazing because they're super light. Both of them are 250 grams each, not like not combined, but then and then so yeah, they're pretty lightweight, and the image is beautiful out of them. And the 0D as well, just I mean, just helps out a lot in terms of for stabilization. It helps out, and it just looks great out of the camera. And then I've got the 15 mil as well for low light, and when the when my DOPs are not happy with, for example, the 14. Sometimes they just want a lens that looks a little bit more expensive, and that's actually that's a cinema lens that can do focus pulling and everything. So that's why I've got this one. I have the 12 as well, and unfortunately, I don't get to use it as much because it's a little on the heavy side. Uh,
Yeah, the 12. I've got mine here. It is a bigger lens, certainly, right? It's
yeah,
yeah, big,
and yeah,
a
the
little
cinema
bit bigger than
version.
the 15, but not by much. But
Mm,
compared to the like the 11 millimeter, it's a good jump down from the 12. Um,
yeah, I mean the cinema version looks even bigger, and it's got this huge like front
the
as well.
the
So
front mount to mount a matte box, yeah.
yeah, so that's why I usually fall back on either the 11 or the 15 or the 14 as well. But I think like these four, I really like my favorite to use and the ones that I get the most use out of. Uh, a little bit less on the 11 because I'm I'm either on the 9 or on the 14, depending on the resolution that we're going for. But yeah, it's nice sometimes to have the option to just be a little wider, and also the 9 on the full sensor on the Super 35 is just insanely wide, and it's also an interesting look to have sometimes.
And that's so and we're mixing a little bit, and I want to make sure I'm tracking with the lenses. So the 9 millimeter, you're using the 9 millimeter 2.8, the APS-C coverage that will cover that will cover the Super 35 on the red.
Yeah.
Um, and so, but then when you go to the 11 and the 14, are you jumping over to the FX6 to get the full frame?
No, I mean for now, I just ordered the 11 and the 14 this morning, but for now I was using these for the Komodo. But yeah, I'm planning on using them as well on the FX6. But that needs a little bit more experimentation as I haven't done it yet. But yeah,
Um, so here's I've got a question on in the chat that I almost understand. Uh, with the new Sicaro's camera mount, you can move the camera, or can you move the camera mount forward to not see the props when you're shooting with the 9 millimeter?
yeah. So the Sicario is this drone over there, and this drone, these two, and actually these four are Sicarios over there. So yeah, on the Sicario now, there's like two different types of camera mounts. One of them kind of looks like this, and I don't know if I'm even allowed to show that, but I think I am. So yeah, it looks like this, and this one you can bring the camera all the way to the front. I mean, if we look at it, we can bring it all the way here, so that's quite a bit. And then there's another new like top plate that will allow you to bring the camera way at the front, where the 9 gets. And then where the props get out of the view of the 9 mil. So now we can go really wide and still no props in view. So it's nice.
And So that's going to lead me, and as you play with the 11 and the 14, I'm going to be interested to see the next step of the 9 millimeter full frame lens that Laowa
Yeah.
launched last year. That it's I've been trying to shoot with it and trying to play with it, just stills, and there are many people out there that are far more skilled photographers than I am that know how to use a lens that's that wide. It's a challenging lens to shoot and get compelling images out of. But for video, I, I'd
Yeah.
love to see that thing moving. So
Mm.
it's
Yeah, I think for video, there's a lot of potential to it, either indoors or in really like crammed spaces where there's a lot happening, or to get that really like effect of coming towards something and getting real close all at once. Yeah, I'm really curious as well, especially on the full frame. Yeah, on the Komodo, it already looks great. It looks very wide, and for example, diving down a cliff looks insane with it because you just see it feels like the cliff is just 2,000 meters high, and then you're just falling down from it. But yeah, with the full frame, it can be even crazier.
well, so and we've got a question in the chat that's sort of what we were just talking about with the 9 millimeter full frame. Is that too wide to be useful? I and I'm
Uh, Mm. I don't necessarily think so. I'd have to see it on the full frame. I'd have to see it on the Komodo. It's definitely useful for the crop sensor, and even at full frame. I mean, at full sensor. So on the Super 35, it's still very useful because as we fly with our drones, we need quite a bit of stabilization afterwards because there's no stabilization whatsoever. The camera's hard mounted on the drone. So there's a lot of times where you want to stabilize it, and then you're gonna lose 10 to 20% of your frame if you do so. So it's nice to have a wider lens.
Are there situations when you're flying that you will go to more of a normal length lens or even a longer lens? Like, have you had
Uh,
any situations or shots?
Yeah, actually, I have recently. I was in Iceland, and uh, the landscapes were so huge over there that I wanted to put a 24 on the Super 35. So that's like a 35, and yeah, I wanted to have something a little bit longer, which I tried, and also the problem with going longer with FPV is that you kind of lose the effect of FPV, and I still haven't mastered that side of things of going with longer lenses to something where you can actually um, still have an interesting effect from it. I've gone 18 a couple times as well, but I think we lose the effect. So sometimes if the landscape is really huge, it's useful, uh, but in most cases, it stops at the 15 for me on the Komodo. So 20 mil equivalent in full frame.
And I've got another question from the chat, but one that I have as well is what is the image stabilization solution that you're using? What is it? Depend on project
Uh,
or depend on who you're working with as far as software? But is there something that you're using specifically?
So on the Komodo, there's it's global shutter, so you can use either warp stabilizer, and it works really well. It's surprisingly well, especially when you're using a 0D lens, because since there's no distortion from the lens, it's easier for the stabilizer to work.
Hmm.
And you combine that with a global shutter, and you have something really easy to work with. So when I personally work on my footage, that's what I use. And then when the production companies that I work with actually work on the footage, what we usually do is that we track it, and then we use something like Nuke, where we can really go deep in the stabilization and have something buttery smooth at the end. Or there's a plugin that's free from Stickman FPV that's called Stickman's Camera Butter that you can use on Nuke to smoothen out your footage, and it's really great. I don't use any of the, like, for example, there's something really famous called SteadXP. I don't use it because I you lose the raw codec, which I don't want to be and I don't want to be losing, and my most of the productions that I work with don't want to lose that codec, so um, I don't use it basically.
So, all right, you're shooting with the red Komodo, and you can only choose two lenses. What are like you're traveling light? What are the two lenses that you're grabbing?
Um, and why am I shooting?
I well, so I'm gonna play a Bentley ad in a minute. So let's
Yeah.
go with a car commercial.
Uh, is there gonna be night? Like, is there gonna be low light or no? Maybe or
You got to be ready for anything. I'm a
okay.
terrible director of photography,
Okay,
or
I'm
I'm a
trying to
terrible
be
director.
okay.
You don't
I'm
know what's
trying to be
coming.
ready. Okay, trying to be ready for anything. I go with the 9 and the 15 because both are pretty fast. They can go. Then the 9 can go 2.9, and the 15 can go 2.1. Um, and they look great. And yeah, with the 9, I can do 60 FPS or 50. So yeah.
Um, I'm gonna ask. So as far as the camera, and so we've got it. Somebody just posted in the chat that they're excited you're starting to use the FX6. I'm curious why not the FX3.
Because it's got IBIS, which is a mechanical stabilization system on the sensor that messes up, like that gets completely messed up by FPV. So we can't really use the FX3. I wish we could. It would be a lot lighter. I'd lose, yeah, probably 500 grams or something. But we can't use it because of IBIS. What it does basically is that as the drone vibrates, it will just randomly move. And if it shifts in the middle of your movement, you kind of lose everything. So try not to use it.
All right.
And also the
So
FX6 looks better. So
I yeah, and I've been looking at the FX3 myself, and so it's interesting that that's the reasoning, and it makes sense that yeah, no, it does have that image stabilization built in. That's gonna I can imagine it's always going to be trying to counteract what you're doing. Um,
yeah, but I think it's an awesome camera. I just wish it didn't have. I wish they made the Alpha S3, Alpha 7 S3 with IBIS and the FX3 without IBIS, and then I would have gone. I mean, I actually ordered an FX3 with because I thought it didn't have IBIS, and then I canceled immediately when I saw that it actually did. But yeah.
um, so I've got two people now who've just asked, and I'm gonna ask that. So on the FX6, have you played with or looked into catalyst stabilization?
I'm going to for sure because it's looking really promising. It's gyro-based stabilization, so it just uses metadata that we've got from the footage and stabilizes it perfectly. So um, I'm definitely going to look into it. I haven't played with the camera too much yet. I was on shoot, but yeah, I'm going to.
Awesome. All right, I want to play one of these other videos and see. So I've got two more queued up. Um, is there one that you think we should go to?
Yeah, I think we should look at the Bentley.
All right, let's run it. All right, so I'm a little like, did you like how much of? So I see a lot of cuts in that ad,
Mhm.
right? Like it seems apparent that there have to be a bunch of different cuts and pretty smooth transitions. Did you fly under that car?
That's the question that everyone's asking, and like I saw you react when, as I was playing, and no, I didn't.
Okay.
It's what we did for that one is that I went in and I went as close as possible, but the problem is you have a Komodo that's this big, you have a drone underneath, and the car is like this high, so you can't even you can barely fit the Komodo through. So there was no way I could fly under. So what we had to do is to go and I would park myself like right next to it to the point that I even scraped the wrap on the cart at some point on the first or second shot. Maybe I just like slightly give it a gentle tap. And then it's a CG. It's actually we cue in another movement that we did. So this one we shot on the 9mm, and then we took the same Komodo with the 9mm, the same 9mm, and we put it on a trolley and we just passed it under the car. And then I did the other side of the shot where I just parked myself next to the wheel and then boom around, and that's
Uh,
it. But yeah, we used it. I mean, we used a little trolley to pass the camera underneath, and even to do that, we had to lift the car up so that we could have the camera run underneath.
it, that is an effective shot. Like the transitions in it, like no,
Yeah.
you said you saw my reaction as I was looking at it. That caught me. Um, and how much so from a production standpoint, what different kinds of productions are you working on mostly? Is it like is there anything that's really picking up? Are there people that are looking for the FPV? Is there or is it a broad market?
I mean, right now it's a little bit of everything. It can be huge Netflix features with crazy budgets. It can be commercials. It's a lot of commercials, and then it's music videos. These are the three. The main one is commercials for sure. I think because commercial projects are shorter and they can catch up on trends a lot faster than other industries. I mean this in music videos, but they can catch up a lot faster than feature films, for example. And they can try things out. They can afford. They also have a like a lot of budget usually, so they can afford to try things out, make mistakes, scratch a complete shot just because like it didn't work out. So yeah, and also I think this is where you find most of the visually innovative and creative people right now. in the filmmaking industry. It's in commercials, and I guess that explains it.
And so what? And we're gonna start to get ready to wrap up here, but another question, just sort of what memorable like, do you have any like highlight experiences over the last 5 years as you've been shooting FPV? Are there milestone markers or experiences that you've had that you didn't foresee?
Yeah, I mean, most of it, I guess. I never thought I was gonna do this. I never thought I would have an office. I would have an employee. I never thought any of this would happen. Really, I was just trying to. I was just looking for a new toy, and I found FPV, and then 2 years later, it became my full-time job, and now 2 years later, I have an office, I have an employee, and two more on the way, and just that is insane. And I travel into a lot of different places. Every shoot is special for a reason. There's always something really interesting that happens, someone really interesting that I get to meet. So I feel very fortunate in that sense. And then there's like bad experiences as well, where you crash and you or you lose some footage or some stuff like this can also happen. So yeah, there's a little bit of everything. It's for sure. The thing for sure is that it's really intense, and there's always something to kind of remember.
So before we go, it's the word has come up a whole bunch and came up against right there, crashing.
Yeah,
How often are you? I mean, are you crashing regularly, or like certainly when you're starting? I imagine it's even.
yeah. It's part of
I've crashed a
it's part
normal
of the
drone
experience.
several times, so I can only imagine FPV. It's magnified.
Yeah. Well, it's part of the experience in FPV. Like when you start, it's like it will happen every time you go fly, and it's normal. And that's why we built our drones to be able to withstand the type of abuse that we put them in, and also to be able to fix them when something happens. So I mean, it's okay when it's a like maybe just a GoPro in a few parts. You rarely break the GoPro right off the bat, but it happens at some point. It will sting. But then with the cinema camera, it's another world afterwards. The worst is not even to crash; is to crash and not be able to recover the drone. Because if you don't recover it, let's say it falls in the water, or let's say you lose it, because sometimes you crash and you don't know where it is and you can't find it, then that's the worst thing that happens. Crashing is part of it almost, and you have to be ready for it. If you want to fly FPV, you have to be ready to crash and to accept it a lot.
So how many when if you've got a commercial shoot, how many backups are you traveling with? If it's a shoot that
Uh,
you have to travel for, like
yeah, usually I
how
have at
redundant are
least
you?
usually I have like at least two. That's the minimum, and it can go up to four of the same. But then I usually bring from I usually bring around. I'm counting as well at the same time, but like about 3 to 6 or 7 different types of drones. So sometimes I end up with like 15 drones on set, and I only use one for the whole shoot. But I need the 15 because you need maybe you're gonna want to do a certain shot, and if you don't have that drone, you're not going to be able to do it because a lot of drones are very shot specific. So yeah, like I bring a lot of drones, and so to make sure that even if I crash one, I still have another one. Even with the cameras now, like I bring two Komodos on set every time, uh, and and yeah, like I have even a backup at home just in case. Because yeah, it's part of it. Crashing, breaking stuff. It's inevitable. It's gonna happen at some point. So yeah.
And so from so on a production on a shoot, are you are you flying solo or do you have somebody else assisting spotting?
Um,
Is it a solo flight when you're doing a shot, or is there somebody that like specifically you bringing with? You say you've got an employee.
well, yeah, I mean, you want to have a spotter almost all the time. So usually I try to have a spotter. Sometimes they can double as an assistant, especially for the cinema camera. I always bring an assistant with me that takes care of like changing the batteries, looking at exposure, focus, starting the recording, stuff like that. And then, as a golden rule, you need to have a spotter almost every time you're flying because you've got the goggles on, so you can't really see what's going on around you. So you need someone to tell you, hey, there's someone that went through the block that we put or something. Like if like I mean, usually we try to put some lockdowns in streets, for example, but sometimes people will still like force their way through. So you need to know about things like this.
All right. And before I've got one last question, but Swiss Frames on YouTube caught that you said you've got two more employees on the way. And I don't know if this is solicitation, but do you know who those two employees are going to be already?
Yeah, I already know who they're going to be. One of them is going to be an assistant, and one of them, I don't want to say it yet. We'll see if it actually happens, but it's exciting.
So then that's going to lead me into my final question here of what's next? What's the future? Do you have a 2 year outlay of where you see things going, or what you're do you have a goal of what you'd like to be able to shoot?
uh, well, I I've shot pretty much everything. Like I mean, I've shot any type of shoot that I wanted. I've been able to see almost every type of shoot that I've wanted to see. Now it's just do more and do even crazier things and to try and push and to new things that people haven't seen before. There's still like some good bucket list places that I want to film, uh, bucket list directors that I want to work with. So there's a lot. There's a lot to do, and then the next thing as well is to get more people within the company and to be able to train even more pilots and have and uh, allow them to have like an actual full-time job in FPV. This is like, I mean, it's crazy. This is something that didn't even exist 3 years ago. No one was a full-time FPV cinematographer 3 years ago, and now the job didn't exist, and now I'm I'm trying to offer that to other people. So yeah, it moves so fast that it's hard to know what it's going to be like in 2 years because it can also just fall apart completely. Like I don't know.
We got one more question that did pop up in the chat that I'm curious if you can share uh, your worst or one of your worst crash experiences, not to bring up painful memories.
Yeah, the I mean the worst one I had was something where I was asked to hide. It was on set also, but very early on, like probably one of my first shoots, and I was asked to hide on set in between some cars as I was flying through a street, and then there was the sea at the end of the street, and I went out and I did it a couple times. It worked out, but I was concerned about my radio control and link. Basically, like the link, I was scared to lose the radio link, so I just kept going. And then I got a little bit comfortable, and then I did it another time, going a little bit further back, and the drone like because when it loses radio link, it just cuts and it falls, and it just cut and went into the water, and then I could see it from the shore. We could see the drone burning underwater, and that was like that was probably my worst memory for sure.
Did you recover? Were you able to recover that at least so you had the footage?
Yeah, we had the footage. We
Okay,
got the footage,
good.
but nothing else. Basically, just the footage. The GoPro was fine, and the rest just went to the trash. But yeah, that's how you learn as well, I think.
Yeah, awesome. Benoit Finky on YouTube. Other places that we can find you if somebody's looking to get a hold of you, website
Yeah.
links.
So Instagram also, it's at Benoit Fink on Instagram. Uh, this is the place where I'm mostly active, I guess, because YouTube, I haven't done a video in quite a bit, but there might be one coming up pretty soon, and it's going to be a big one. If it happens, it's crazy. But yeah, we'll see. And yeah, and also let's remind people about the coupon for the Benoit
Yes.
5. If you guys want to get 5% off, there's a discount code that you can use. It's only for the 20 first people that use it, and it will be done on Monday. So if you want to go, just go now. And yeah, apart from that, just nothing much. That's it,
Awesome.
really.
I really, really appreciate, and I'm gonna close out. We've got the one last video queued up that I'm gonna say thank you and farewell, and I'll leave the coupon code off in the corner here. But we'll close out running this the last video here if that makes sense to you.
Okay, sure, yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Again, I'm Stephen Neff from Laowa. This is our Meeting the Masters series. Yeah, Benoit Fink, thank you again. And let's roll out and see how we look here.
Thank you.